Part 2. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 11. Chapter 11, Protect her well. Sister, don't be afraid, brother is here to protect you, he will protect you. Loses who? Mom, Enan. Loses who hesitated and didn't know what to say. I'm already asleep, don't worry. Auntie, please call the kindergarten teachers for us. Don't make them worry. Oh, and my mother Gu Jinshu said sensibly. Okay, but your mother will be here soon, and there will be 2 other aunts. What? Gu Jinshu covered his nervously. How could he know about his truancy so soon? Lin 11 found it funny, but she didn't laugh after all. She just smiled bitterly and said, they came to see Anan. The last time I came to see Zhangwanan was yesterday. That was because Zhangwanan had just arrived. Unexpectedly, she would come the next day because of an accident in her family. Look, time is like this. Luzes, who walked gently to the bed, took Zhangwanan's little hand, and whispered, don't be afraid, sister, brother is here to protect you. Brother, I will protect you. After a while, people from the Liu family started arriving one after another, and they were still the aunties from yesterday. They came to comfort Lin 11 and Zhangwanan. Zhangwanan slept for a while, and when she woke up, she only cried for a while and then stopped crying. Everyone found this unbelievable, but they were still happy for Zhangwanan from the bottom of their hearts. Lin 11 was uneasy all day long. She almost felt that her heart was going to have a problem. Fortunately, her sisters comforted her, otherwise she would have collapsed sooner or later. Lu Lin called at around 3 o'clock in the morning. The group of young women who were usually well protected by their husbands were all lying on the sofa in a state of embarrassment. Their eyes lit up when they heard the ringtone, and they immediately gathered around to prepare for the good news they wanted to hear. Don't worry, the operation was successful. There will be good news tomorrow. Go to bed as soon as it's so late and take care of the children. What about Lao Zhang, what should he do? Lin 11 refers to the bones. Don't worry, I will make arrangements. They have no close relatives in Jinqing, only a few close friends like them. They have never heard the Zhang family mention their relatives in their hometown before. Zhangwanan is still young, so only Lu Lin arranges it for him. You take care of yourself, and when Tang Yu's condition gets better, bring her here. I can take care of her if nothing happens. Okay, I'll make arrangements when the time comes. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief after hanging up the phone. It's already that time, let's all go and have a rest. The rooms are all tidied up. Lin 11 made arrangements with the sisters before returning to the room. Although the operation was successful, they were still worried, so no one could sleep even in a comfortable big bed. As expected, new news came at noon the next day. Tang Yu survived, but became a vegetative state. But everyone felt that this was a blessing in misfortune. They no longer asked for anything, they just wanted Tang Yu to be well, and miracles would always happen. Lu Lin arranged Lao Jiang's funeral, completed the transfer procedures for Tang Yu, and transferred Tang Yu back to the best hospital in Jinqing, so that it would be much more convenient for Lin 11 to take care of Tang Yu. More people still feel uncomfortable about Zhangwanan. She has experienced so much at a very young age. She can't remember what her father looks like at such a young age. She can only see her father in photos. As for her mother, she is fine. Point, at least something real and tangible. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 12. Chapter 12, It fell into her hands. It has been less than half a month since Zhangwanan's parents had an accident. Although Zhangwanan hasn't seen her parents for a long time, she still has some memories of them, so she often calls out to them. Lu Lin and Lin 11 had never thought of hiding it from her. After all, it was her parents who had the accident, and she would know the truth sooner or later. They can't hide it from her forever. Zhang Wanan and her mother, although she is in a vegetative state now, they can't hide it from her, right? If Tang Yu suddenly woke up one day, Zhang Wanan wouldn't be surprised at least that he had a mother. They hope that Zhang Wanan's face will not be full of surprise at that time, but full of joy. They thought about taking Zhang Wanan to the hospital to see Tang Yu from time to time, so that she could have some impressions and not forget Tang Yu's original appearance in her mind. They thought that when Zhang Wanan grew up, he would gradually tell her the truth. That would be easier to accept than knowing the truth all at once. Mainly because Zhang Wanan is still surnamed Zhang and is a descendant of the Zhang family. She can't let her raise her head and ask why she lives in the Lu family and has the surname Zhang, right? So they still have to tell her the reason, but they will still take care of Zhang Wanan as their biological daughter, and wait for Tang Yu to wake up and give her an explanation. When Lin 11 took Zhang Wanan to the hospital for the first time, Zhang Wanan cried very hard. She still remembered who was lying on the bed. She was as anxious as if she knew her mother had been killed, and stretched out her little hand to touch it. Tang Yu's face was crying and calling his mother inarticulately. The person on the bed was indifferent. From then on, Lin 11 often took Zhang Wanan to the hospital to see Tang Yu lying on the hospital bed. The more times he went there, the less often Zhang Wanan made trouble. Sometimes he would sit on the side of the hospital bed and play with his hands, holding the toy, or crawling to Tang Yu's side, lying down and touching Tang Yu with his little hands. He fell asleep. Even sometimes she would lie down in Tang Yu's ear and call her mother softly, just like a child trying to wake up a tired parent in a low voice, which was particularly warm and magical. Even the doctor lamented that blood is thicker than water, and said that this would help Tang Yu wake up. Lu Zizhu's small change towards Zhang Wanan was at a dinner. That time he pursed his lips and took the initiative to make Zhang Wanan milk powder, which really surprised everyone. It's just that it was his first time drinking it and he was really inexperienced and it was not proportional at all, so Zhang Wanan didn't drink it at all. But after that, everyone saw Lu Zizhu's behavior towards Zhang Wanan. This morning, Lu Zizhu woke up early and followed Zhang Wanan's giggle laughter to the small garden outside. Lu Zizhu walked up to Zhang Wanan coolly with his pockets in his pockets. "Hey, kid," Lu Zizhu shouted. Hearing Lu Zizhu calling her, Zhang Wanan let out an excited cry, and then called Guo Guo and asked Lu Zizhu for a hug. Lu Zizhu smiled helplessly, and then took Zhang Wanan from his father's hand. "Did there be any trouble last night?" Lu Zizhu asked. "No," Zhang Wanan said loudly. "Okay, then be good and I will take you to the children's playground when my brother is on holiday, okay?" Zhang Wanan couldn't understand such a long paragraph. He tilted his head and said nothing for a long time. At the end, he heard a loud chirp. Lu Zizhu stood stiffly on the spot for a moment, his face reddening to his ears. But that kid Zhang Wanan acted as if nothing had happened. He even pointed at his chubby little face and said, "Kiss, kiss, kiss." Lu Zizhu felt that his mind went blank. There were so many little girls in the kindergarten who wanted to kiss him, but he avoided them. Unexpectedly, he did not avoid this little girl. It was simply in her hands. How could he keep his title of aloof male if others knew about it? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 13. Chapter 13. Looking for a wife should start from a young age. Lu Lin, who witnessed the whole process from the sidelines, was also shocked. Without saying anything, he quickly ran back to the house to call his wife. His son being kissed by a girl is no small matter. Maybe this is his future daughter-in-law. The future is still long, and there is still hope to match him up. With his son's temperament, there is still a high possibility that he will not be able to find a wife in the future, so he should find a wife as early as possible. So looking for a wife must start from childhood. Even when Lin 11 hurried out, Luzes who was still stunned on the spot, and Zhang Wanan also calmed down and was looking curiously at this man who was motionless and seemed to be petrified. From time to time, he would reach out and poke Luzes who's red face. Lin 11 and Lu Lin both laughed miserably, and even coughed twice on purpose when they walked over. This cough also brought Luzes who back to his senses. He pursed his lips and glanced at his parents who were joking. Then he quickly put Zhang Wanan back into Lu Lin's hands and ran away quickly. Hey? Why are you so shy? Lin 11 deliberately teased him loudly. Luzes who acted as if he hadn't heard anything and left without looking back. Then he went to the living room to grab his school bag and asked the driver to take him away. Well, your son is not going to run away overnight, right? Isn't that right? I don't know. Lu Lin shook his head in confusion. Isn't this a little too shy? Just say that a child like this should find a wife as early as possible, right? Otherwise, how will I find a wife in the future? Lin 11 took Zhang Wanan into her arms and said with a smile, brother is too shy. In the future, Anan will have time to kiss my brother more often. Roar, Zhang Wanan agreed loudly. So in the days that followed, the Lu family's yard and house were filled with scenes of Zhang Wanan chasing after Luzes who's kiss, such as crawling hard to chase after Luzes who with hareze, such as crawling hard to chase after Luzes who with rice grains. Another example is crawling hard to chase Luzes who with water stains all over his body. Anyway, there were scenes of Zhang Wanan chasing Luzes who everywhere, just like a little hooligan. It wasn't until she got older and walked more nimbly that she changed from crawling to chasing Luzes who. When Luzes who came back from school in the evening, he came in timidly like a thief. However, no matter how careful he was, the sharp-eyed Zhang Wanan saw him at a glance and shouted excitedly, brother. Lu Lin, who picked up Luzes who from school on the way, patted his son on the shoulder and said, it's useless. Luzes who, dot. So Luzes who straightened his back and behaved himself. He just wanted to walk over calmly, but he gave up again the moment he saw Zhang Wanan. He ran upstairs like a gust of wind. Zhang Wanan, the culprit who caused the unclear situation, pointed his little finger upstairs in confusion, timidly called brother, and then cried wow. Because it seemed to her that her brother didn't want to talk to her anymore, so she was very sad now. Zhang Wanan has gradually become accustomed to this family after coming here for so long, so she rarely cries so fiercely, but this time she cried like when she first came here, and no one could coax her. The little girl was very sad. So Lin 11 decided to call her son. As she walked towards the second floor, when she reached the stairs, she saw Luzes who standing at the door, as if eavesdropping on what was going on downstairs. Lin 11 felt happy and immediately said, my sister is crying, why don't you go and comfort her? Luzes who turned around proudly and returned to the room, saying firmly, I'm not going. Lin 11 nodded and didn't speak like he did when he asked Luzes who to help coax the child for the first time. He just compromised immediately and said, well, a little brother just moved next to us, and Anan played a lot with him today. If you're happy, then I'll go find the little brother next door. After saying that, he turned around and walked downstairs. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 14. Chapter 14. The Unreserved Girl. Hey mom, Luzes who called Lin 11. What? Lin 11 immediately stopped and looked back at him. Luzes who didn't say anything. He just walked out of the room, pursed his lips and walked downstairs, then walked straight towards Zhang Wanan. He walked over and said helplessly, why are you crying again? I can testify that the only reason I cried today was because you ignored me when you came back. After Lin 11 coaxed his son down, he defended Zhang Wanan. Without saying anything, Luzes who took out a lollipop from his pocket and gave it to Zhang Wanan who was crying, and coaxed, stop crying, brother, can I give you some candy? Maybe it was Luzes whose words that took over the matter, Or maybe it was the candy in his hand that successfully seduced Jongwanan. Anyway, the little girl stopped crying and just blinked at Lu Zizhu with her big watery eyes. After a long time, he opened his mouth and shouted guo guo. Lu Zizhu smiled tenderly, peeled off the candy in his hand, and whispered, "You can only eat a little, otherwise you will get cavities." Jongwanan naturally didn't understand all of the sentence, but she knew that she could eat candy, so she walked over and grabbed it. Taking it over, he stretched out his little hands and waved them excitedly. He was so happy that he didn't forget to give the first bite to Lu Zizhu. Lu Zizhu looked at the candy beside his mouth and smiled helplessly. "Brother won't eat it, so you can eat it." So Jongwanan stopped being polite and started eating. Lu Zizhu just looked at her quietly, thinking that she had almost eaten, so he planned to stop her from eating any more. "Can you please stop eating? If you eat too much, you will get worms in your teeth," Lu Zizhu coaxed softly. "Worm, worm. Yes, there are bugs." "No." After speaking, Jongwanan took another bite without being affected at all. Lu Zizhu, "If you keep eating me, I won't play with you, and I won't take you out when my brother is on holiday," Lu Zizhu said, pretending to be angry. But when Lu Zizhu talked about the holiday, he remembered the scene in the morning, and his face turned red again. But the next second, Lu Zizhu wanted to hide his head, even finding a crack in the ground to crawl in. Jongwanan kissed him again when he wasn't prepared. It was sticky and smelled like green apples. Lu Zizhu stood up angrily and looked at Jongwanan condescendingly for a long time. Finally, it took him a long time to say, "You are a girl. How can a girl be so unreserved? Jongwanan is simply more annoying than the girls in his class. She always kisses him when he's not paying attention. How much harm will he suffer if this continues?" Lu Zizhu went upstairs again and left Jongwanan alone on the sofa. This time, Jongwanan surprisingly didn't make a fuss and just concentrated on eating the lollipop. Lu Lin went to the study room, and Lin 11 was learning skills from her aunt in the kitchen, so there was only a little doll eating candy left in the huge living room. If Lin 11 hadn't come out to ask them to eat, they wouldn't have known that the little guy was curled up on the sofa and fell asleep. When Lu Zizhu came down to eat, he took a look at the sleeping guy and felt that this female gangster was really big-hearted. She would sleep after eating, eat after sleeping, and the most important thing was to act like a gangster. "Mom, I think Jongwanan needs some education. She always kisses me." Lu Zizhu coyly mentioned this issue to his mother after the meal. "Huh?" Lin 11 was puzzled. "She kissed me again in the afternoon." Lu Zizhu's face turned red after saying this. But who knew that Lin 11 would laugh forward and backward in the next second? "That means my sister likes you." End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 15. Chapter 15. I have something for my brother. But she is a girl and should be reserved, otherwise she will suffer in the future, Lu Zizhu explained. Lin 11 frowned and realized that this boy actually knew how to be reserved. It was indeed not simple. "Okay, Mom will tell her," Lin 11 agreed, but whether she listened or understood was Jongwanan's business. So after Jongwanan woke up, Lin 11 talked about this matter seriously, but Jongwanan looked confused and could only scream a few times. It seems to be saying, "You say what you want, if you understand, I will lose." But Lin 11 didn't have much hope. Time flies by like a fleeting horse, and 3 years have passed in the blink of an eye. Nothing has changed in the past 3 years. Tang Yu still hasn't woken up. The only change is that the children are getting older. Jongwanan is 4 years old this year and has started to go to school. He walks quickly and speaks fluently. What's more important is that the relationship between the two little guys is getting better and better. Lu Zizhu no longer has much resistance and dislike for Jongwanan, and has begun to slowly accept it. In his eyes, Jongwanan is already his biological sister. But in Lin 11's eyes, this was acceptance of the daughter-in-law she considered. The day Zhang Wanan went to kindergarten, Lu Zizhu and Lin 11 sent her there together. As soon as he entered the school, Lu Zizhu started to feel worried when he saw so many boys. He squatted down and held Zhang Wanan's soft little sign language and said sincerely, "You are a girl, girls, you need to know how to be reserved. You are now an excellent kindergarten child, so don't kiss boys casually." Only my brother Zhang Wanan said with a smile, showing her small white teeth, and then kissed Lu Zizhu. Lu Zizhu stood up and touched her head. "Don't make a fuss on the first day of school. My brother will pick you up after school in the afternoon, okay?" "Okay. Goodbye, Mother Lin." "Goodbye, brother." Zhang Wanan said goodbye to them obediently. Although Zhang Wanan was still young, Lin 11 often took her to the hospital to wake up Tang Yu in the past few years. As time went by, Zhang Wanan came to know that the person lying on the hospital bed was her biological mother. Only sometimes when she asked about her father, Lin 11 would tell her that her father was a prince and had gone to a faraway place, and her mother had to wait for her father to kiss her awake. Zhang Wanan is young now, so he deceived him in a daze. However, even though she knew that the Lu family was not related to her by blood, she still regarded them as relatives and affectionately called them Lu's father, Lin's mother, and brother. As expected, Zhang Wanan listened to Lu Zizhu's words and didn't make much trouble at all throughout the day. Moreover, with her good popularity, she quickly met many good-looking girls and boys. Mingling with the classmates in the class. Compared to the usually quiet and aloof Lu Zizhu, she seems much more lively. Lu Zizhu is 9 years old and is already in the 3rd grade of elementary school. School ends half an hour later than Zhang Wanan, so he didn't pick up Zhang Wanan in time. Originally, Lin 11 wanted to wait for Zhang Wanan to pick up Lu Zizhu after school, but Zhang Wanan remembered what Lu Zizhu said in the morning, insisted on waiting for Lu Zizhu to come, and mysteriously said that she had something to give to Lu Zizhu. In desperation, Lin 11 had to ask the driver to take Lu Zizhu from the elementary school to the kindergarten. Then the two of them played at the entertainment facilities at the entrance of the kindergarten for more than half an hour. When Lu Zizhu arrived, Zhang Wanan's eyes suddenly lit up. She ran over and hugged his leg, and said coquettishly, "And missed my brother. Why did he come here?" Lu Zizhu stroked her head lovingly. "I'm sorry." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 16. Chapter 16. Chocolate is for those you like. It doesn't matter, Zhang Wanan said loudly, then mysteriously brought the stuffed pig bag from behind to the front, reached inside and searched for a long time before taking out a piece of chocolate. Then he gave it to Lu Zizhu like a treasure. "What? Chocolate? Leave it for my brother to eat. I see that my brother usually gives me chocolate to eat. I think he must be reluctant to eat it himself. This was given to me by other children, so I left it for my brother. Lu Zizhu, he just doesn't like eating it. Brother, if you don't want to eat it, you can eat it." Lu Zizhu returned the chocolate to her. Zhang Wanan was also a greedy little cat. When he found out that Lu Zizhu didn't want to eat, he became rude. He took it and tore open the package and ate it. In the end, his mouth was so dark that he looked like a little tabby cat. Lu Zizhu smiled fondly when he saw her look like this, and used a tissue to wipe the chocolate from the corner of her mouth. On the way home, Lu Zizhu asked Zhang Wanan how his day was, and then he opened up Zhang Wanan's chatterbox and talked non-stop. She said that she had made many good friends today, among which she had the best time. There were only two who were inseparable all day long, a boy and a girl. The boy's name was He Chiu, and the girl's name was Sujiao Xiao. She also said that today's chocolates were given by boys. Lu Zizhu interrupted her when he heard this. One Valentine's Day, his father gave his mother chocolate. He also said that chocolate is for the people he likes. He also taught Loses Who that when he has a girlfriend in the future, he must give his girlfriend chocolate. Even if she doesn't like eating, give her a box. At that time, Loses Who thought that giving a box of chocolates to other girls might as well be given to Jongwon because she wouldn't waste it, so from then on he often bought chocolates for Jongwon. But why did this little boy give Jongwon chocolate this time? One day he will definitely meet that Hee Chae. You have to remember that from now on you can only accept chocolates from your brother. Why? Jongwon asked with wide eyes. Loses Who thought to himself, what's the reason for this? What should he tell her? After thinking for a while, Loses Who said seriously, it may be poisonous. You can see that the corners of your mouth have turned black after you just ate it. It may be poisoning. Jongwon was puzzled, so she decided to make it clear to Loses Who, chocolate is originally black, so you eat it until it reaches the corner of your mouth. Oh, we're home. Loses Who didn't want her little mouth to continue talking, so he interrupted her hastily. Jongwon pouted and became a little angry, and ignored Loses Who after getting out of the car. Lin 11, who had just witnessed everything, couldn't keep her mouth shut. This was so funny. This was the first time she saw her son talking nonsense and being so serious. Those who are not poisoned are obviously jealous. After getting out of the car, Loses Who pursed his lips and followed Jongwon in silence. It wasn't until he reached the second floor that Jongwon couldn't help but turn around and ask loudly, why are you following me? Loses Who looked innocent and said nothing. He just pointed to his room to indicate that he was going back to his room. Jongwon blushed. She really had nothing to say. Loses Who's room was indeed there, so she couldn't stop him. Jongwon entered her room with a blushing face. Just before closing the door, she heard the annoying voice of Loses Who again, you can't come to your brother for homework left by the teacher. Jongwon thought that it was just the first day of school. How could the teacher give difficult homework? Moreover, she was only in a small kindergarten class. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 17. Chapter 17. The little crying girl needs to be coaxed. So after Loses Who finished his homework and read extracurricular books for a while, he became a little anxious when he didn't see the little guy coming. If this was normal, the little guy would have come several times. Loses Who scratched his head, thought for a while, took out a box of chocolates from the drawer, opened the door and walked out. He knocked on the door softly a few times and called out a few times, but no one inside answered. Loses Who murmured, then brother is in. Then he gently opened the door and walked in. But who would have expected that when he entered, he saw the little guy curled up on the bed and asleep. Loses Who sighed and couldn't bear to disturb her. He put the chocolate next to his pillow, closed the door and quietly exited. The two of them didn't meet again until dinner time. Loses Who came down from upstairs still looking cool, but Jongwon, that little girl, came down with a chicken coop on her head and gave it to everyone just before arriving at the restaurant. Performed a flat throw. This fall immediately woke her up, who was still dazed at first. Lin 11 was so frightened that she ran over to help her up and asked gently, are you okay, honey? Jongwon said nothing and kept looking straight at the dining table. After a while, he held his fists in his hands and cried in grievance. Even Lin 11 knew why Jongwon was crying, but Loses Who was indifferent. You should know that if Jongwon usually encounters a problem, Loses Who will be the first one to rush over, but this time he was indifferent and didn't even look at it. Jongwon cried so aggrievedly that her face turned red, and she even started retching in the end. In Lin 11's impression, she hadn't cried so hard for a long time. Even Lu Lin, who had just returned from get off work, was extremely anxious, but their cool son remained indifferent. In the end, it was Lu Lin who went over to lift Loses Who up by his collar and said, coax my sister. Loses Who didn't coax him, he just pretended to be fierce and asked, did you see the chocolate I put on your pillow? Zhang Wanan heard him speak and stopped crying instantly. She just sobbed with tears in her eyes and said yeah in a low voice. Is it enough to eat? Not enough, still in a low voice. If it's not enough, I'll buy it for you. Don't ask for other people's. Do you know it's poisonous? The tone was still fierce. Yes, brother, hug me, Zhang Wanan said like a little mosquito. Luzes, who startled her with his eyes, then reached out and picked her up from his mother's arms. I don't know why I'm crying. Zhang Wanan didn't say anything. He just buried his head on Luzes Hu's shoulder and cried. Behind them, Lu Lin and Lin 11 were stunned. Is this still their son? Why are they so fierce? But he seems a bit handsome. After dinner, Zhang Wanan went to Luzes Hu's room with chocolates in her arms. She climbed up on the bed with her short legs and poured the chocolates onto the bed, choosing a piece for Luzes Hu. Brother, eat it, she said in a small voice. This time Luzes Hu did not refuse, but took it and peeled it off and ate it. After Luzes Hu ate 3 pieces of chocolate in a row, Zhang Wanan left with the remaining chocolates satisfied. After leaving, Luzes Hu finally couldn't help but curl his lips. This was the first time he had eaten so much, and it really cost him his life. But what can I do if I don't eat? Don't you have to coax that little crying girl? He was almost heartbroken when he cried like that just now, but he still had to pretend to be indifferent. Fortunately, his father gave him a step down in the end. Otherwise he will be deposed. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 18. Chapter 18, misleading. They went to school as usual the next day, but after yesterday's lesson, Luzes Hu instantly changed from a handsome young man to a verbose young man. He didn't stop giving instructions since he got in the car. Even Lin 11, who was sitting next to her, was tired of listening, but the little girl held her face and listened attentively like an admirer. And all Luzes Hu was nagging about was not to play with boys, not to accept things from boys, and not to play with that he Chiu anymore. Zhang Wanan agreed one by one, and made a very serious promise that he would not eat dinner if he was disobedient. Then Luzes Hu smiled with satisfaction and said, study hard. Yes. In the end, when Lin 11 sent Luzes Hu to elementary school alone, she couldn't help but said, Luzes Hu, if you keep talking like this in the future, your father will send you off alone. Luzes Hu scratched his head in embarrassment and explained, I was afraid that she would suffer because she is so stupid. Lin 11, there are so many reasons to worry about my future daughter-in-law, so I give in. As a result, even though Luzes Hu warned her in every possible way, Lin 11 was still left by the kindergarten teacher because of Zhang Wanan in the afternoon. Mother Anan, today is the second day for the child to go to school, but his personality is very different from yesterday, as if he has become a different person. Lin 11 looked worried. What's wrong with Anan? Zhiru Amoruo, in fact, Lin 11 has guessing a rough, it must be related to a boy. Sure enough, as she guessed, today, a child helped the teacher to hand out corrected homework. As a result, when the child handed it to Anan refused to accept it. The child helped her put it on the desk and she even picked it up and threw it on the desk. She fell to the ground, and then other children helped to pick her up and she was still on the ground, and even acted a little bit and said she didn't want it. Finally, after careful understanding by our teacher, little classmate Anan said he was named because of his elder brother, so I want to know who his elder brother is. I would like to ask, are the 2 children who helped deliver and pick up the items boys? Lin 11 asked sheepishly. Yes, does it matter? That's right. Huh, the teacher didn't understand. So in the following time, Lin 11 explained what happened to the teacher for Zhang Wanan and Luzes Hu. The teacher suddenly realized, it seems that my brother wanted to protect his sister too much, so he indirectly misled Anan. However, I think I should tell Anan more clearly. I hope that this kind of thing will not happen again in the future. Don't worry, I'll talk to them when I get home, Lin 11 assured her. So Lin 11 ignored Luzes Who all the way, and went straight upstairs with a sullen face. Luzes Who didn't know what he had done wrong, and Zhang Wanan made a mistake and pursed her lips tightly, not daring to speak. She was afraid of causing trouble again. Mom was unhappy, so there was silence in the carriage. It wasn't until dinner was approaching that Lu Lin came back from the company and broke the silence. As soon as Lu Lin entered the door, he first looked at his dark-faced wife, and then at the two silent little guys. The pressure seems to be a bit high. Lu Lin pointed the finger at the two brats wittily and asked seriously, "Did you two make Mom angry?" Neither of them spoke. Lu Lin felt his head was pounding. He was one person below 10,000 people in the company. Apart from being treated like this in front of his wife, when had he ever been treated like this by a brat? So he immediately put the blame on the two children and confirmed that his wife was angry because of the two brats. You two will not be able to eat enough tonight. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 19. Chapter 19 Losing Face. Zhang Wanan, Luzes Who. They shouldn't have eaten too much in the evening, this punishment is quite good, it just suits their wishes. But Luzes Who still doesn't know why his mother is angry. Until Lin 11 spoke with a dark face. Let me give you a suggestion. I don't think you should punish them by not eating enough. Anan can eat as she should. Please throw this little ancestor Luzes Who out. After saying that, Lin 11 picked up Zhang Wanan and went to the restaurant. The leader is right, even if he doesn't understand the situation, he must flatter him. This is Lu Lin's usual survival tactic. Otherwise, if he doesn't obey, he will have to sleep on the sofa. So Lu Lin glanced out the window, sighed melancholy, picked up Luzes Who, and walked out. He said plausibly, "Let's go, little ancestor. I always make your mother angry. I don't dare to go against your mother and risk saving her. You just sacrifice." Whether he is strong or not depends on Luzes Who himself. Luzes Who. It's not easy for him to survive to this day with such a father. But before death, Luzes Who didn't even understand what happened to him. Then the next second Luzes Who was thrown out of the door. After the door was completely closed, Luzes Who didn't struggle. He just glanced at the ground, and then sat on the ground in silence. It's nice to enjoy the little night breeze. So when Lin 11 saw the scene from the window, she said with hatred, "Your son has no desire for survival at all, just like you." Lu Lin. What's the same? Is he strong enough to survive? Honey, what mistake did Xiaozhou make? Lu Lin said and secretly glanced at Zhang Wanan, who was acting a little strange today. These two children don't give me any peace of mind, Lin 11 said angrily. So Lin 11 told Lu Lin what happened in the kindergarten today. Lu Lin rolled his eyes after hearing this. This didn't understand. Not only did Zhang Wanan's teacher think he was abnormal on the second day of school, the most important thing was that he also made his wife angry. Honey, don't be angry. I'll call that brat into the study in a moment and give him a good education. You can explain it to Anan more clearly. She's still young. Well, go and call him in. Once he heard that Luzes Who could come in, Zhang Wanan, who was still eating seriously, quickly raised his head and said, "Mom, can I call my brother?" "Well, you go ahead," Lin 11 rubbed the little fool's head and said. Then Zhang Wanan quickly ran to the door and opened a crack. "Brother, you can come in." Luzes Who looked at himself sitting on the ground in a miserable state, coughed a few times, stood up, patted the dust on his body and asked, "Mom, are you still angry?" "Guess." Luzes Who nodded, then walked over and took Zhang Wanan's soft little hand and walked toward the restaurant together. Lin 11 glanced at Luz's who and her voice softened slightly. After dinner, go to the study with your dad. So Luz's who sat down and started to eat honestly. He didn't dare to say a word during the whole dinner, for fear of being thrown out again. It doesn't matter if he does it once or twice. How can he face Jongwanan after too many times? He is his brother. He wants to set a good example for her, but he can't lose face in front of her. After dinner, Luz's who followed his father to the study, while Jongwanan followed her mother to the bedroom, and then began to accept their parents' nagging. It wasn't until they had had enough nagging that they finally left that terrible place. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 20. Chapter 20. I don't mind going to kindergarten for a few more years. The next day when they were on their way to school, Luz's who was still chattering, but the content was very different from yesterday. You have to have a certain amount of contact with boys, don't be too close, but don't have a relationship with them like your older brother when they hand out homework, you have to take it, because it's yours to begin with. Jongwanan still listened attentively with her eyes wide open, and she would chime in a few words from time to time to prove that she was listening. It seems your dad didn't talk about you yesterday in vain. Lin 11 glared at Luz's who. Luz's who scratched his head in embarrassment and thought, if he doesn't listen well, he will have to take over the steps in front of the door in the future. How dare he not listen well? Luz's who gave a few more instructions when he sent Jongwanan to the door, and finally said seriously, I don't mind coming back to accompany you to kindergarten for a few more years. Jongwanan was so amused by him that she giggled. She tugged at the corner of Luz's who's clothes and said, brother, squat down. What are you doing? Luz's who didn't know why, so he could only squat down. Then he only heard a click sound coming from his ears and a soft touch on his face. Luz's who pursed his lips in embarrassment, stood up and rubbed her soft hair. Hurry in, don't be late. Okay, Anan will go pick up her brother with her mother in the afternoon, she said in a clear voice. Luz's who smiled softly and nodded. Seeing Luz's who nod, Jongwanan danced excitedly and jumped into the kindergarten gate. Afternoon. The mother and son were sitting in the car after school. Jongwanan suddenly touched Luz's who's arm and said seriously, brother, I'm so tired from studying. Luz's who raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he suddenly understood what Jongwanan meant, but he pretended not to understand. So? Don't read it anymore. No, Jongwanan said anxiously. That is how the matter. Jongwanan bit her lips, and after a long while she hummed like a mosquito, brother, you must be more tired after studying on weekends, right? Not tired. Luz's who said that he loves learning and learning loves him. Jongwanan, forget it, I don't want to say anything else. So Jongwanan simply closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. This scene made Lin 11 want to laugh, but she still had to hold it back. Her son was so straight as a man. It was hard to see how worried Xiao Anan was. He had to bear so much at such a young age. It was not easy. Actually, I understand what you mean. After a while, Luz's who ran to Jongwanan and whispered in Jongwanan's ear. Who would have thought that Jongwanan didn't want to pay attention to him at all, turned his head and continued to fall asleep. Sure enough, people who pretend to be asleep cannot be woken up no matter how much they scream. Don't you just want to go out on the weekend? As long as mom agrees, I will take you out. Luz's who deliberately raised his voice and said. Sure enough, this trick worked very well. Jongwanan sat upright in excitement and said with a smile, I woke up, hee hee. Luz's who, however, turned his head and made a disdainful sound. He was a bit petty despite his age. Jongwanan smiled sheepishly and looked at Lin 11, is that okay, Mom? Are you just two? Mom is not worried, but she really doesn't have time on weekends, Lin 11 said with some embarrassment. Although her son was not that unreliable, it was still uneasy to have two little children out. Zhang Wanan knew as soon as he heard that there was no chance. He curled his lips and looked out the window in frustration. Just when she was extremely disappointed, Luza's whose clear voice broke the silence, "Let the bodyguards follow us, just watch from a distance." Zhang Wanan's eyes lit up and she looked at Lin 11 expectantly. Lin 11 thought about it and softened, "Okay then, I'll go home and let Dad make arrangements. Please pay attention to your safety." "Okay," Zhang Wanan replied excitedly, thinking that she could finally go out to play with her brother. End of this chapter.